So when we left the MTC, I remember it was like pretty early in the morning. I remember we were like on the little coaster that they were, little mini bus, whatever you call it, on the way to the airport, and I remember just like looking at the mountains, and I was like, I have a hunch that I'm not going to see anything like this, like for the next 2 years. And it was, it was like super long layover, whatever. And when we finally got there, it was like 12 o'clock at night. And there's not much of a time difference between here and El Salvador. I think it's just an hour. Anyway, we got there, and you walk out, and it's kind of like, U.S. Airlines, or like a U.S. airport, in the sense that you like walk out and there's everyone waiting for you. But here it was just like mass chaos. There was just like people everywhere, and it was hot and it was humid, and everyone was speaking Spanish, and they had like detained a couple of us in like customs and stuff because we had no idea what we were doing. No one spoke really good Spanish. So we finally get out, and our mission president saw us, and so he just came up and like bear hugged us. And then I remember his son actually was in the MTC at the time that I was there, and I saw him, and I took pictures with him. So the first thing that his wife asked me was, where's your camera? Where's your camera? I want to see the pictures of my son. So I pulled my camera out. It was the first thing she did. And so then from then on, like my whole mission, she's like, my son always says great things about you. She's like, I'm always going to remember you. So that was kind of a funny way that it started. And then from there, like we got all our luggage, loaded it up into they call them coasters. They're like these weird little bus things. And got in the bus and took off for the assistant's house. And they passed out Subway, but our flight had gotten in super late, so it was like super cold and like kind of soggy. I remember that. And I remember thinking the assistants got up and they were speaking. And I remember just thinking that they were the coolest guys in the entire world. Like, there was this one guy who was from Honduras. His name was Elder Aguilar. And I was just like, I want to be exactly like him. It's like, that is the missionary I want to be. He was confident. He was super nice. He was super respectful. And for the next couple weeks, months, because he left only like when I had like 4 months in the mission, I just remember thinking, I want to do everything I can to be this missionary. Right? So that was like a pretty cool first impression. We finally got to the assistant's house, and then like there was just like a bunch of mattresses on the ground and like no sheets and like no blankets. So I slept that night in like no blankets, and it was like cold, and I didn't know what I was doing. And then I got up the next morning, and they're like, they got us up at like 4:30, because at that point there was like 23 people in the house, because the whole office was there, and then all of us. So they're like, all right, you guys got to start showering now so we can be ready. And I get in the shower, and like the drain's busted, so I'm in like water up to like the tops of my ankles, and there was like a window there, and there was like a tree coming in, like tree branches. And I just remember thinking, where am I? There was like a gecko on the wall, like a little gecko, and it was just crazy. And so then, like, we had our first meeting, and our mission president came in. He was just like, just commanding authority. And I remember thinking, okay, I want to be like Elder Aguilar, but I want to be like him. Like, holy cow. I just thought he was like next to the apostles, like the most righteous man on earth. Like, it was just crazy. And that like whole feeling kind of like stayed with me for the first like 2-3 changes on my mission. I had a pretty tough companion my second change. But even then, like, I just remember walking around, and I always try and explain this when I teach mission prep or when I go into the MTC or anything. It's like, it was like a magic. I just remember walking around, and I'd like look at signs, and I was just like, this isn't real. Like, I'm not on my mission. I've waited my whole life to do this. I've been so excited. And stuff was in Spanish, and people would come up and start talking to me, and I'd be like, I have no idea what they're saying, but this is so awesome. And like, I'd be in lessons, and I'd be trying to teach, and I couldn't say anything, and they'd start laughing, and my companion would be like, dude, it's okay, like, you're gonna get it. He was from Guatemala. And it was just an incredible experience. And later on in my mission, I I just always wished that like I could go back to just being like a junior companion, beginning of the mission, because it was just like magical. I don't know, I loved it. Starting the mission, the whole mission was awesome, but starting the mission was so cool. It was fun. One other experience with the family that was really cool was just this experience in my second to last area. My companion and I, we'd had a lot of success. And so, we didn't, a lot of missionaries tend to feel bad when they don't baptize or when they don't have success. And, I think I felt that same thing, very often. I felt that, even when I had baptized and I hadn't had very much success for the most recent week or the most recent 2 weeks, I think that's just like a personal thing. I was always just wanting more. I always wanted to, help somebody else out or teach someone else or take somebody else to church or baptize somebody else. And my companion and I were just kind of like down. We'd worked super hard. We'd done stuff that I'd never done before. Just been super creative with activities and ways of asking referrals and just, doing cool meetings in the members' houses. So it's raining. It's pouring rain. We're sitting there and I look at my companion. His name was Elder Aston. He's just the man. And we like kind of gather under somebody's roof. And I just look at him like, dude, I don't know what's going on, but we're doing what's right. I'm feeling down. I know you're feeling down, but we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're working our heart out. We're trying to work with the members. It's just a rough time. And so we sat there and we said a prayer and we're like, Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to be missionaries, and we thank you for trying us and for trying to prove us and to see how faithful we actually will be. And we're thankful for that. We're thankful for the success, the recent success that we've had, and we're thankful for all these different things. Help us to find somebody else to teach. We really want to help somebody else out. And we started contacting down this street, and we got to this one door, and we knock on the door, and this dog goes nuts, and we're like, oh crap, let's get out of here. This dog is going to tear us to pieces. It's this tiny little dog, but it's just a vicious dog. Oh my gosh, it always wanted to bite us. So we sit there for 2 seconds, and we kind of turn heel. We're like, okay, this dog's just going to kill us. No one's here. But somebody opened up the slats and was like, hey, who are you guys? So we're like, oh, we're the missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're like, never heard of you. We're like, really? It's like, can we come in and talk with you guys for a second? They're like, sure. So we go in and start talking with them. I mean, it was the most insane family. That was family of gold. It took them a little while to get baptized, and actually were baptized after I left, but mostly because of work-related reasons. They couldn't get there because of work. It was really hard to schedule work off, so they ended up getting a certain amount of attendances, how every mission has, before someone can get baptized. They ended up getting those, and invited me back for the baptism. I was in another area, and it was just, it was super awesome. When I went back for their baptism, they were just so happy. And their daughter works pretty much not 24/7, but she leaves at 6 o'clock in the morning and gets back at 11 o'clock at night. And so she never could go to church because she even works on Sundays. And it was super, super difficult so she's never been able to get baptized. She has been in the church for a couple activities that have been more later on in the evening, and she's gotten off work early or something. But yeah, that family was just so, it was just such an incredible experience because they were so happy. And they got sealed in the temple about 10 months ago or so. And that was another testimony builder to me that if you're working as hard as you're supposed to work, and doing everything that you know how to do humanly possible and everything that you know how to do as a missionary to succeed and help people, then you're going to be successful. You're going to help people. Does it always come like it did that time? No, that's a coincidence that, we said that prayer and we were just like really bummed and we found this amazing family. And they ended up not being baptized for a while. So it wasn't like, all of a sudden we had an immediate success. And there were plenty of times in my mission where I'd say, these prayers or have fasts and nothing would work out. In fact, I was kind of, not bitter, but I was kind of sarcastic a lot of times about fasting because I felt like in my mission, whenever I would fast is when we would have like the least amount of success. So I was always like, well, I don't know what that means, but it was like, I'm fasting and trying to do my best and everything is falling through. So there were often times when everything would fall through, but if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, one way or another, it's going to work out. You're going to be a successful missionary. Maybe you're not going to baptize 100 people or 150 people like some kids in my mission did, but you were going to have success. You were going to do exactly what the Lord wanted you to do because He only called you to do the best that you could do, right? There was a big civil war, and the Civil War is mostly... I didn't study a ton up on it, but from what I could gather from the people, it was mostly because the government was imposing taxes and doing things that the people really didn't like, and so all these people were just getting like squished under the iron fist of the government. And so they fought back. They were kind of like the rebels that fought back, and the government and the army was the ones that just like kind of came in and took them out. And it was a long, long war, and it was a brutal war, civil war. And in fact, I'm pretty sure the United States got involved and helped out the government of El Salvador. So a lot of the people there are sometimes very unfond, or not fond, I guess is a better way of saying that, of the U.S. government, just because they got involved and helped out the side that a lot of the people, because the majority of people there are in extreme poverty, obviously they didn't want the government to win, right? So that civil war was hard, and it has left a lot of scars on the country, in terms of growth, but also in terms of the church. So my mission was the West mission, San Salvador West at the beginning, and then it later went to Santa Ana, Belize, right? But the East mission, for one reason or another, never baptized half as many as we did. I mean, yeah, there were months where we were like neck and neck, but over the course of a year, we would reach 2,000 or 2,500 or like, however many baptisms, and they would mostly be like 1,000 or 1,200 or maybe less than 1,000. And so I'd always wonder why, because, or like, why was that? I can understand like difference between El Salvador and Russia, or El Salvador and somewhere else. A lot of it depends on the missionary, a lot of it depends on a lot of things, but my mission president, I asked him that question once while we were driving in the car, and he said, you know what? I've been over to the east part of the mission, because my mission president, my second one, he served his mission in my same mission. So he served his mission in the El Salvador mission shortly after it had reopened. So he was familiar with El Salvador, and he was from Guatemala and had been in Area 70 beforehand, before being a mission president. And he was just like, you know what? It left a big scar on that country, and especially in the east, that's where a lot of the fighting went on. The army burnt down an entire forest to get some rebels out of it that were hiding in there and kind of doing guerrilla warfare. So they just leveled the whole forest to flush them out. I mean, it was a very rough experience for all of the Salvadoranians, and so it scarred them a lot, and so a lot of people were pretty bitter against that. Almost everyone believes in God. There's not a high atheist kind of population, but even though they believe in God, a lot of them do it or say that there is a God just for tradition, but they don't really believe in like a loving God. They just believe something exists because of that experience. That being said, like their culture is very like, they kind of like the Mayans. They had their gods, and they had their language, which was Nahuatl. They spoke that, and it used to be pretty widely spoken in El Salvador. Now it's dying because they only teach in Spanish and English in the schools. And they kind of like got rid of all the Nahuatl books, like dictionaries and any books written in that language. You can't really find them anymore. The government did, to kind of like modernize the country, to make them not as third world, I guess. But they have a pretty cool heritage. Like they conserve a lot of those old things that their ancestors used to do in like different regions. So, for example, in this one place called Nahuizalco, they're really big into like artisan stuff. Like they make crazy baskets and all these cool wood carvings. And in this place called Chalatenango, La Palma, that's what they call it. It's like this huge artist place. They're super into painting all this stuff, and they've got a very distinct way of painting, so that when you see a piece that's from there, you instantly are like, oh yeah, that's from the Palma. And it's so that part's really cool. They've got this book. I think a lot of Central America reads it, but it's called the Popol Vuh or something like that, and it's about how a white god came to their ancestors. So this is kind of cool. There's like parallels you can draw between this and what happened in the Book of Mormon. But a white god came to them and left, and they waited for his return because he said he was going to return. So they waited for his return, and then it's about how like the conquistadors came, and they were white, and so they thought that it was like the white god had come again because there was a leader who everyone looked to, so they thought that was the white god that was coming back to them. And none of the people that had been there when the first white god came were present at that point. They were long gone. So at this point it was all just tradition, so that no one knew what he actually looked like. They just knew it was a white god. So he came, and we all know what happened with like the conquistadors. They took over and made them slaves and stuff. But they read it in all of their schools, so it's kind of like a cultural thing. They read the Popol Vuh, and it's that story about the white god that came. So what I do remember is that the average salary of just someone getting paid like minimum wage, which is what most people get paid, is like $200, maybe between like $180 to $200 a month. So, most people are not living alone. So, they're splitting the cost of, say, the mom and the dad and 3 kids on like $200 a month, which is pretty crazy. I mean, they only get paid, I think minimum wage was $4 a day. So they only get paid like $4 a day. But then, they go to the market and like one thing of, rice or one thing of beans is like $2. So just on like one shot, like one thing that they're going to probably eat in like a day or two is already like half of their day's work, right? So it's super, super hard to like save up money. Most people are just getting by on like a day-to-day kind of like weekly basis, right? And they don't get paid every day. I think there are jobs that they do, but yeah, they're kind of like living paycheck to paycheck. I don't remember like average kind of costs of certain things like toiletries or like certain food items, but I know that rent, depending on where you were, rent could be like easily half of that amount that they were like allocated for the month. And that's why probably they didn't ever have like a ton of food, like on hand in their house. It was kind of like, oh, well, we need food. Okay, well, let's go down to the store and buy it, because like I mentioned before, there's tons of stores everywhere. But mostly because it's like, well, if we don't need the food, then let's like not go buy it, right? Because we don't have the money to do that, If they wanted to make eggs in the morning, they'd just run down to the store and get eggs, but they never buy like a carton of eggs, So it was interesting. That was really, really interesting. Yeah, the majority of the people that I worked with were kind of like living paycheck to paycheck on no more than $180, $200 a month. And if they had 2 people working, then it could be like $400, but still between like, generally if there was 2 people working, it was because they had more kids. So then it was between like 6 or 7 people. So yeah, it was just kind of like a double-edged sword. You could work more, but it was only because you had to provide for more people. But kids do start working really young. Kids start working very young in like the coffee fields, or out doing the harvest in some sort of crop, or doing construction. So it is it's common that kids start working early to kind of bring in money for the family, because otherwise they're not able to make ends meet.
Do you have any guesstimate like how much it would cost like per month? The apartment, kind of like the range, like low end, high end apartments. From any of your memories of like doing that?
So we never took care of the rent for our apartments, because the financial secretary would just take care of that from the office. So we never took care of that. Actually, we didn't like pay that out of our paycheck. I know in a lot of missions they do, and then they get like reimbursed. So I don't know how much it costs for us. But I think in like the houses that we stayed in, it was like $100 like a month or so for rent. And those were like maybe like 100, 120, and those were like mid to higher end houses, right? For other people, it would be anywhere from between like 60 to 100, I think. And they, obviously that's like an apartment. A lot of people didn't have money for that, so they just go and like chop down a bunch of trees and set up a house, like just kind of in the woods, with like 4 posts and tarps and stuff, and a bunch of like metal sheets as walls. But yeah, so I think yeah, for the Salvadorian people, I think most people pay between like 60 to 100 for just like normal houses or apartments. That being said, there's not a ton of apartments. There are, but most people just have their own houses that they've either built like with concrete, or that someone else has built and they've just like paid it off. They used to use the colon, which was their national currency, but they switched to the dollar. And so everyone kept selling things as if it were in the colon, but everyone was only getting paid in the dollar, which they were getting paid a lot less of. So everyone became really, really poor. Like the economy just kind of got thrown into a loop, like a massive recession for a while. And it's still, they're still living in pretty extreme poverty, I would say, the majority of the country. But most people do manual labor of some sort. I had 2 areas that were nice areas, and people in those areas usually had gone to college and had gotten some sort of degree and were working as like a lawyer, or working at like a bank as like a teller or something like that, or even in some sort of management position. And people that went to school usually had better jobs that paid better. But the majority of people that I ever taught or ran into, it was all manual labor. They all either worked in, all the women could usually get a job at massive factories, like assembly line kind of factories. And so a lot of women would get jobs there, and men too, but I don't know, I think it was kind of something that women could do instead of being out like in the fields, working. So that was tough labor, working in those factories. And then the men would usually work, like out in a cornfield, or doing something else like harvesting coffee, or in some sort of like crop. It almost seemed like the majority of people that I ever taught, and maybe it was because that's where I spent a lot of my time. I spent a lot of my time in sort of more rural areas. But it's a lot of manual labor, and it's tough manual labor. I mean, the guys' hands down there are always super calloused because they always use machetes or, shovels, and they don't have like gloves like we do to keep our hands all safe. So their hands are all just way, way, way calloused, just like leather. And, they're tough. They're tough people. In El Salvador, I think I mentioned this. I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but in Central America, they all have like nicknames for like each country. So like Guatemala, they're Chapin, and then El Salvador, it's Guanaco, and then in Honduras, it's Catracho, and and in Nicaragua, they're just Nicas. That's just, and it's kind of nicknames that other people have given them that are like sort of derogatory. Like in Guatemala, a Chapin is kind of like an Indian. So like really, really dark skin and not super like intelligent. And I'm not sure what a Catracho is from Honduras. But in El Salvador, they call them Guanacos because, well, there's a couple like schools of thought, I guess. So it's kind of funny. Some people say it's like a bird that's like afraid of everything, but the most people that I ever talked to, they always said a guanaco was like kind of like a donkey, in the sense that you can just put like a ton of crap on it and it's super dumb, but it just keeps working hard. And that's exactly how the people in El Salvador are. I'm not saying that they're dumb, but they are not very educated, and they just don't have a lot of formal schooling. There were tons of people that didn't make it through high school or middle school, or tons of people that didn't know how to read or write. Very, very few people that I ever met that went to like college, and finished. Maybe they started, but they didn't finish. So their work ethic is unreal. So that's pretty cool. Their houses are all concrete because in wood it's harder to regulate temperature unless you have like a heating and air conditioning system, and no one has that. So in concrete, it stays cooler in the summer than like a wood house does, and it stays pretty warm when it's cold down there. So it doesn't ever really get cold. So it's pretty slick. It's nice. All the floors are tile, so there's like no carpet. That's one thing I missed. But yeah, it makes it nice because like it's really, really dirty down in El Salvador. I mean, it's just dirt roads and mud and everything. So you're constantly tracking mud around and dirt everywhere. So especially as a missionary, you get back to your home or your house, your apartment, whatever it is. They were generally just houses. And you're tracking dirt everywhere. But because it was tile, it was super easy to clean. So cleaning was always really easy because it was tile. Like we had showers and stuff, and we had toilets. But the showers, I had one shower I had two showers then in all of the areas that I had. The rest of them were kind of like spigots that you'd fill a bucket up with, and you'd do like a bucket shower. So that was kind of fun. I like that. And then we had, we had like toilets. I never really had to like have an outhouse or like just like a hole in the ground or anything. So that was awesome. But there were a lot of people that had those because as missionaries, we generally tried to stay in like our mission president wanted us to stay in nicer places. So, but yeah, lots of people didn't have like indoor plumbing or showers. Lots of people just had like, there'll be like 4 posts, it's just like wooden sticks that they pounded into the ground, and then they'll put like a tarp, like a black tarp that you use when you go camping. So they'll put a tarp around it, and they'll just have like a part that's like an entrance. So you go in there and you can like see the person's head above it, and you know that they're taking a shower because they're just like, there's soap everywhere, and they're just like showering themselves. Obviously that's in like the poorer areas, right? I would say like in city, most everyone has showers and indoor plumbing. But if you get outside of the city, even a lot of the suburbs didn't have indoor plumbing. And even if they did, then you'd like always have problems with the water and pipes breaking and stuff, and the response time is very slow. I mean, we had a pipe break one time and we didn't have water for like 2 weeks or something in one of my areas, so we'd like do our laundry in the river, like, or like go over to another missionary's house that was like 10, 15, 20 minutes away in bus. So that's pretty funny. They do like a lot of like folk dances. Like they have their like folk dresses, and they're really colorful, and they do these like traditional dances. The youth in the church were often doing some sort of like rehearsal for those things, especially because when I was there, they did the dedication of the temple. So for the cultural event, all the youth had to practice their own like cultural dance of El Salvador. I never really knew like many of the like why they did these cultural dances, but they do have these like really big, like flashy, bright colored dresses. The women, and then the guys are kind of like in cowboy hats and like white shirts and slacks or something like that. But yeah, that was pretty fun. Like the youth really enjoyed that, and not only in the church, like all over the place. They just really liked their like folk dances. But you would definitely see people walking around in dresses like that, like the ones that they would use in those rehearsals or in those performances, in more rural places, just because it was part of the culture. So there were like these really bright dresses that people would wear just because that's what they used to wear like back in the day. So it's not so much like embellishing the culture at all. It's more just like showing everyone what the culture was like. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. Yeah, so like tourist sites kind of. There's actually this place, it's called, well, in Spanish, they have like different departments. That's what they call them. They're kind of like states for us, but they're just like way smaller. So in a way, you might say they're like counties, because I think it only takes like 6 hours to drive from one end of El Salvador to the other. And El Salvador is like a long country and only like this tall, so I think it takes only like 3 hours to drive from like bottom to top or something like that. But there's one of the counties or states or departments, whatever you want to call it, is called the Liberty, and it has, well, so I've heard from people down there and from one of my friends, it has like world-class surfing. So one of my buddies, he is like, I don't think he is anymore, but he was like a semi-pro or just like a very low pro windsurfer. He was on the cover of like Windsurfing magazine, and just like he's like a really talented windsurfer. And so he knows like a lot about like what places are the best to surf, what places are the best to windsurf, and all these different things. And when I first got my call, we got our calls on the same day. So I called him and I was like, dude, where are you going? And he was going to like Arizona, I can't remember. And then I told him I was going to El Salvador, and the first thing he says is, holy cow, I'm so jealous because that surfing there is incredible. And I was like, what? In El Salvador? So I guess there's like really good surfing. So a lot of people go there, and in that place, the port of the Liberty, that's what that city is called, it's pretty rich because a lot of touristy people come. So they don't stay, so that's like not a lot of money is coming that way, but money is coming in because they come and like stay at hotels. So there's like really nice hotels that you'll find there, just like out of nowhere. You're like, wow, that's like a super nice hotel just in the middle of like the rainforest, in the middle of like the jungle. Yes, that's like a super nice place. Really, really good surfing. There's another place called Chalatenango, and it's super, super pretty. I mean, it's just like gorgeous, and there's these way, way tall mountains, and it's the only place in El Salvador where, very rarely, but if it ever does, it snows, because it's up so high. And Chalatenango is an interesting place because for some reason or another, the people that live there are like my color. They're not like the rest of the people that live in El Salvador or Central America. So they don't have darker skin. They've got like white or pale skin. And they wear these big, big sombreros, these huge hats. And they're always just walking around with those hats on. They're really, really pale skin. And they all live in Chalatenango. So when I was getting a lot better at speaking Spanish and just like working on my accent, sometimes people would be like, "Where are you from? Are you from Chalatenango?" They'd ask me if I was like from that place, which made me feel awesome. I was like, "Yes, they think I'm a native." but yeah, like white people live there. So one thing about Chalatenango, that's like the county, right? And they have different places in the county. I think I mentioned this last time, but they have a place called the Palma, which is like an artistic, like artisan kind of place, and they have these really, really distinct works of art. Like you can tell a Palma anytime you see it. It's kind of how some people can be like, "Oh yeah, that's a Van Gogh." I can't do that, but I can look at something and be like, "Yeah, that's from the Palma," just because it's a very distinct like way of doing it. And super, super pretty. I mean, the stuff there is way, way pretty, and they do really cool stuff. For instance, like down in El Salvador, all the houses usually have like clay shingles, and they're these massive shingles. They're like that thick, and they're like wider towards the bottom, so they kind of like slant in. They'll take those and they'll like do these super cool paintings on them. So then people like hang them on my walls. And my mission president's wife actually gave me one that she got from there when I came home. So I have one at home that's it's like one of those shingles painted, and it's just gorgeous. So they have some really, really talented artists. And obviously there's like a lot of historical things that you can visit. There's a lot of cathedrals, like a lot of places to visit, kind of like in the cities. And I don't know too much about the other side of El Salvador, but I know there's like, there's a volcano that's pretty, actually it just erupted a couple weeks ago. But there's a volcano there, which has a really long name. It's Chaparrastique. And they do like a lot of cool like artisan stuff at like the mouth of the volcano, kind of like at the base of the volcano. And then there are a couple of volcanoes like in my mission too. Like I lived at the base of one for a while. But there's one place called Jiquilisco, and it's kind of like El Salvador's right here. And then there was like kind of like a finger, kind of like Baja California, that just kind of comes down, like runs along the thing, and it kind of creates like this little strait, right, where it's just like this big long stretch of water, and people will go there all the time and just like blast around on wave runners and like go boating and stuff. I never went there because it was in the other mission, but yeah, I heard about that a lot. People were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to Jiquilisco," and they'd like rent wave runners and like go mess around. Obviously people that like had more money, because it's expensive to rent a wave runner, but yeah, so tourist attractions, I'd say that the coolest thing about El Salvador, and the thing that a lot of people do, is they'll like go and backpack through like Central America. People do that in Europe and South America too, but one of the coolest parts about Central America is just like kind of like this. It's like this organized chaos. Like everyone knows that that's how it is, yet it's still like chaotic. Like the bus system and like the roads, but everyone's just like completely fine with it. Like no one really has road rage. Everyone just drives at like 800 miles an hour. But then people will just stop in the middle of the freeway, like in the lane, and put on their hazard lights. So you come around a corner and there's a dude completely stopped, completely normal. Like, to him, in his head, he is in no way in the wrong, right? So that's really interesting when people just like do stuff like that. Another thing, well, going along with that, it's just like the coolest thing to me about El Salvador. One of the coolest things is just how pretty it is. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And there's trees everywhere. There's fruit everywhere. You get up on top of kind of like a hill or some sort of like, mountain, and you just look down and it's just like jungle, right? There's just trees as far as the eye can see, or like coffee fields. So that's pretty cool. I like that. I think that was like my favorite part about El Salvador. And I heard that on the other side of the mission, actually, it was the other side of the country, it was a lot prettier. Like Chalatenango wasn't in our mission, and Jiquilisco and all those other places. So I heard it was really, really, really pretty. But yeah, that was like my favorite part about El Salvador. So like if anyone's going, that's probably going to be like the coolest thing, unless you're super into surfing, or like artisan work. But kind of like I said last time, I don't advise that lots of people just go to El Salvador to visit, just because it's pretty dangerous. But most of the time the weather it's hot. It's wicked hot, and I guess, I mean, sometimes it's just like in the 90s, and I think it would get upwards of like 100, 105, 110, depending on the area. There was one area where it was just like 110 every day. It was right on the coast. It was like 90% humidity. It was just, that was terrible. You were just constantly sweating. It was the worst. But the worst part about the whole thing is, even when you're not in an area that's that hot, the humidity is just, it's horrendous. Like, it's just 90% or 100%, or I don't even know what percentages, but it's just, your clothes are just always sticking to you. You're just like always feel like you're sweating. So it's pretty hot. And, they say they have summer and winter. They have 2 seasons. So they'll be like, oh yeah, we're in winter. But their winter is the same exact temperature hotness-wise, but just rainy. So it's really like rainy and dry season, because it's just hot year-round, but there's one season where it just pours and dumps. And I've never been in rain like I was in El Salvador. I mean, we'd be walking with my companion, and you'd hear like, you're like, what? You like start looking around, like, what is that? And you like look behind you, and literally you'd see a wall of water like coming towards you, and so you just take off running. You're just sprinting down the road with your comp, and like, it was so fun. I mean, it was crazy. It was super chaotic, but when it rains there, it dumps. It dumps, and there's I guess like a couple cool stories as far as like storms go. One I just loved because it just kind of like epitomizes for me the way I felt about my mission. So I had a companion, his name was Elder Hammond, and he was just like the man. He's from Blackfoot, Idaho, and I'm from Boise, so like right off the bat we're like, yeah, we're Idaho boys. Like, we're just gonna work everyone into the ground. And so we got together, and we'd both been with kind of tough companions beforehand. It was my second change in the mission, or third change in the mission. So we just like ran every day. Like, every day we were just running from appointment to appointment and just talking with everyone we could, and we hardly knew Spanish. It was our third change, his I think 4th or 5th. Anyway, but he was like, my brother actually coined this term when he told me about his mission. He was what my brother calls he was my girlfriend companion, because every time from then on out when I saw him, my heart would like skip a beat. I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's Elder Hammond. I'd see him at Zone Conference, or I'd see him around the mission. I just thought the world of him. I wanted to be like him, Obviously, I've already said I've had a couple idols in the mission, and Elder Hammond was just, he was an incredible missionary. And so one night it just started pouring, and we had a tropical rain or a tropical storm warning, and it was just pouring. And there they don't have like gutters or really good drainage systems or anything, so it was just a cobblestone dirt road in this town, little village thing that we were in. And so the water was like up to our shins, and it's just raging down this street, and it's like the main street of this road, because it was like a village on the side of a hill, and the water's just pouring down, gushing past us, and we had to go down and catch a bus to go do a baptismal interview. So it's just pouring. We're sitting there. We don't have umbrellas. There we always, every single day we kept our bags inside of like 2 really, really thick plastic bags, or our books, like our scriptures and stuff, inside of our backpacks, so that if it rained, because like even in the middle of the summer, sometimes it would just start pouring, your books wouldn't get ruined. And so, we have our bags and our books, but every time you're just kind of like, I don't know, they're like going to get wet. You don't want to get your scriptures ruined. Cool thing there is, well, not cool thing, it can be annoying sometimes, is only assistants and zone leaders had cell phones. So district leaders and like junior companions and normal companionships didn't have cell phones. So like a lot of times when it would rain, you're just like, well, I have nothing electronic, like let's just go. So we take off down the street. And at first we're running, and then we're like, you know what, we're soaked. Like, what the heck are we doing running? And so we start walking. And the reason I said at the beginning this epitomizes my mission is just because we start walking, and we put our arms around each other, walking down the middle of the street. And there's all these people on either side in their houses just kind of like looking out, like, who are these two gringos just rolling down the street in the middle of the night in pouring rain? And we just started singing Called to Serve, like in Spanish. And I remember thinking, this is exactly what I pictured a mission being like. Tough, hard, but the funnest thing I've ever done. Like, it was so cool and so fun. And people often equate their missions with like the hardest 2 years of my life, or like the most challenging 2 years of my life. And I definitely agree to some extent. But the first word that comes to mind for me was the funnest 2 years of my life. Because I worked my tail off, and I don't have any regrets of my mission. I know I could have done things better looking back now, but I did everything that I could, the best that I could, And I think that's all God asks of you. But it was so fun. I mean, you'd get sick. You'd get parasites, and you'd be like, oh, this sucks, but like, when am I ever going to have this again? This is awesome. Like, Paul was having stuff like this, and Peter was getting his like face kicked in. It was just so cool. I don't know, I just loved it. So one that was just really apparent was that you can't buy like more than a 3-blade razor. And so, a lot of missionaries go down with like the like electric ones. And I had one, but like it just never gave like a super, super good shave. And then one time I was making pancakes for my companion, just kind of like a service. I was just like going to make him breakfast, and I was shaving, and then the pancakes were like cooking, and I was like, oh shoot, I gotta flip them. So I like put it down, and then it like rolled off the table onto the ground and broke. So I had to go like start using a straight razor, which was like super tough, just because like I don't have like the roughest skin, so I've got like more sensitive skin. So with like a 3-blade razor every day, or like every other day, it was like, my skin sometimes was just like freaking out, like, I hate you, oh my gosh, because it was just like not the best shave, it was kind of like a more rough shave. So that's one thing. Peanut butter. I think I found peanut butter once in like the in the store in like one area, and it was like every 4 weeks like that they'd get it. So it was just like, oh my gosh. So every time my mom would send me stuff, I'd have her send me like peanut butter. She'd like take it out of like the Jiffy thing because it was more weight, and put it in like a Ziploc bag and send it down. Oh, it was awesome. Freaking loved it. But you can't get peanut butter very easily. What else? I mean, I know there's like a lot of those toiletry kind of things. It's harder to find. Like in the States, a lot of times like it just comes standard that it's like an antiperspirant and deodorant. But down there, it's a lot harder to find like both, unless you're in like a bigger city, like Santa Ana or like San Salvador. But I mean, you can find them. It's just like harder. Sometimes they're not there. And I like made the mistake of just getting like I think it was like deodorant or something, instead of like both with an antiperspirant. And so I'm just like sweating like crazy. And obviously you always sweat down there like crazy. But it was just like worse than normal. And I was like, what the heck is going on? So I found out that it was just like a deodorant instead of both. One thing you can buy in El Salvador that you can't buy here. Well, first off, you can buy like everything. Like you can, they on the streets they just sell everything. I mean, you'll walk through the black market where they're selling like guns and like whatever, and that's only like in certain areas. Most markets are like selling just like meat and vegetables and just like produce, everything you want to buy. And then there's constantly people like coming on the buses being like selling like toothbrushes or like DVDs or just like something. I mean, there's always someone trying to sell something to you, especially in a marketplace. But one thing that you can buy down there that you can't buy here is this drink called cola champagne. And it's like this orange like color, but it's like this cream soda on steroids. I don't even know how to explain it. It is the most delicious thing in the entire world. Like, they would sell them, and I think I told you that like stuff down there is way cheaper. So they'll sell these like packages, right, of 9 liters of cola champagne, and it's so 3 3-liter bottles. They do 3-liter bottles down there. And they'll just like tape them together, and then they'll put the price tag on it, right? So you just get like these 3 ones that are just like taped together with like packing tape, and it's like $2 for 9 liters of this soda. And I don't know what soda prices are like here, but I know you can't get 9 liters of soda for $2. So it was like nuts. We'd like buy it, my comp and I, and then we just like drink cola champagne for like every day, like every night for like 2 weeks. Like, oh, it was great. Oh, it was so good. Obviously there's like the pupusas and stuff that you can't buy here. I mean, you can, they're just like, they're not as good. I mean, yeah, they're just not as good. What else can you buy down there that you can't buy here? Oh, they've got this sweet game. I actually have one in my car. It's called a capirucho. Oh, I guess I should have mentioned that earlier. It's like, they'll take like anything that they can, like, it's kind of like either cylindrical or like kind of like a barrel shape, and anything they can hollow out on one end. So they kind of hollow out a little thing on one end, and then you have like a little stick, and there's a string attached to it, and then you like flick it up like this and flick it down, and you try and get the thing onto it. So you try and get the stick like in the hole. And so, you know, obviously every missionary is going to go out and buy one. And so, you know, I got good at it, but the kids down there are just sitting there doing like 100 in a row. They'll just sit there, and because you flick it up and pull it back down, and then the trick is to see how many times you can flick it up while it's still on there, right? And have it go up and come back down on it. And then they start doing tricks where they like spin it like this and flick it. But yeah, it is. So that's something you can't buy here. And so tradition-wise, for things that I guess you can't buy down here, they have like tops as well. All the kids play with tops, which is pretty cool. But they're like these big tops, this big, like that wide, and they've got like the string that you like wind around it, and then you grab it and you like throw it like this, and it just like spins out if you do it right, and just spins, and then the kids will like pick it up on their hands, they'll like scoop it up, and it'll be spinning on their hand, and then they'll like transfer hands and like throw it up and like catch it. I mean, these kids are just like crazy. You know, if they don't have any video games to play with like we do, that's all they do, right? Or play soccer in the street, because everyone plays soccer in the street. But yeah, so they do these capirucho things, which are fun. Those are super, super cool. And like, you know, you can buy toiletry stuff. Like I said, I'm pretty sure you can find anything that you would want. It's just a lot more expensive. Toiletry stuff is like way, 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 way expensive. And a lot of food is super cheap, especially like meat and stuff. Just because they have like lots of cows and pigs and chickens down there. Like obviously we didn't eat pig, but so yeah, it was. I mean, I never really had trouble like finding something that I needed. I know other missionaries did, because some missionaries like wanted like special things, and I just like never really cared. But yeah, I think you could pretty much find anything if you looked hard enough, or if you like asked around enough. Maybe not as good a quality as you would find it here, but you can find pretty much anything. So there's this crazy story, and this is like years ago, part of El Salvador's history, is they had a gang that came out of nowhere called the Black Shadow Gang. And basically what this gang did was they would dress up in all black, drive around in black cars, black shades, black sunglasses, black masks, whatever it was, so no one knew who they were. And they would drive around, and anytime they saw anyone with a tattoo, a gang related clothing, apparel, or like do a gang sign, or just be doing things gang related, they wouldn't ask any questions and they would just shoot them. They would drive around with shotguns and guns and stuff and do that. And they swept through the country. So they kind of like moved through the country and did that with everyone they could find. And gang violence was almost non-existent for like 10 years after that. To this day, no one really knows who it was. But like the major speculation is that it was the police, like the government, the police officers who just kind of went vigilante and took the law into their own hands and were sick of like having gang members like kill their family members and put ransoms and rent on them, because the gangs would do that. They would come up to like random families, and this happened with people in our ward all the time, and they would like make them pay sums of money so they wouldn't kill them, and they called it renta, so they ponerles renta, and it was crazy. And so this gang comes through and did that, and kind of it cleaned up gang violence for a long time, for like 10 years. But then it came back, and when I was there were rumors that the Black Shadow Gang was like going to come back. So I mean, it's a crazy place. El Salvador is a very interesting place and has a lot of interesting culture. I mean, you'll be going in the buses, which, by the way, are super crazy. I mean, they're just like huge, and they're all painted. They've got the route number on them, but they're all like custom painted with graffiti, and they've got stickers all over the inside of them. And it's like, I mean, you're always trying to avert your eyes, because my mission president always says that, or always said, my first mission president, that a bus was one of the only places where you would see pictures of Christ, Looney Tunes, sports teams, and pornography. And they just have like, I mean, these stickers were just like, oh, there's Barcelona, because they all cheer for Barcelona and Real Madrid down there. Those are the two teams. If you're one, then everyone hates you from the other team, and if you're the other team, everyone hates you from that team. And if you don't pick one, everyone hates you, because they're like, well, you need to pick one team. So it's just all Barcelona and Real Madrid. So when those two teams play, it gets nuts. People are fighting, and there's fireworks going off, and people are shooting guns. Like, it is crazy. But so the buses are nuts, and we would get robbed. Not often. I mean, I only got robbed like 3 times on my mission. But I mean, a lot of times you'd be in the bus and you would see a guy just like coming back through the rows, and you're like, what is he doing? So by the end of my mission, I knew that he was just going to people, and he either had a gun or a knife, and he was just kind of like holding them up and getting money from them. But then they would like oftentimes never do it to us. Like I said, they do have a lot of respect for the missionaries. The people that ever robbed me were kind of like the street thugs that like were like the new recruits and didn't really like know the rules. In fact, I had a pretty surreal experience in one of my areas where like a gang leader invited us to dinner. We didn't know he was a gang leader. So we go over there and we're having dinner, and he goes, look, elders, like, not to like burst your bubble or anything, but like, I'm one of the main leaders of this gang, and it's a big no-no for missionaries to be teaching gangsters, because if the other gang sees, then they automatically associate you with that gang, and you're automatically a target. So we were like, okay, well, we're going to get out of here. And he's like, I know, but what I want you to know is that if anyone from my gang or an opposing gang or anyone in general gives you trouble, you let me know. He's like, I have nieces and nephews and cousins who have served missions. He's like, and I used to be a member of the church. He's like, I'm not anymore. And, he kind of went off on this thing where he was like, God wouldn't ever forgive me, and I'm not going to be the one to say he would or he wouldn't, because I'm sure the guy has done some crazy stuff. But he was like, I want you to know, and I'll take care of it, or I want you to let me know. And we were like, yeah, we're probably never going to let you know, because you'll kill someone if we like let you know. That's code word for I'll take care of it, right? And so it's a really, really interesting dynamic. And there are other places that are like more dangerous than others. But for example, like in one of my areas, it was called Atikisaya. There was a highway that went right through the middle of it. The top part of my area, so above the highway, was all 18 territory. and below it was all MS-13. So the members from below couldn't go up above, and the members from above couldn't go down below unless it was mutual night or Sunday, and then they could. But otherwise, if they did, then they wouldn't. Then they would be in danger of being shot or killed or mugged or beaten up, because in those small towns down there, everyone knows who everyone is. So they would obviously recognize a kid from down below or a kid from above, and it was really interesting. Home teaching was hard because only the people from up above could home teach each other, and only the people down below could home teach each other, right? And it was really, really hard sometimes because it was hard to get people to go and visit people with you. They get member participation in the lessons because you couldn't take people from down below up above because it was dangerous for them. It was cool, though, to see how faithful, though, the members were in the face of all that. Because it was scary sometimes. Excuse me. In that lesson, or in that area, while I was there, I think there were 30 people that were killed, by the gangs. And I was only there for 4.5 months. And so it was not uncommon for us to be sitting in a lesson at night and hear all of a sudden gunshots and hear a car speed off, or hear someone on a motorcycle fly by and hear a couple gunshots, or just hear gunshots. It was very, very interesting, very kind of surreal, a big wake up call. And one thing was that down there they're always blowing up fireworks. At the beginning, I always thought they were gunshots. And then towards the end of my mission, this is just kind of funny, I was very proficient at distinguishing between firecrackers and gunshots, just because I'd heard so many of either one, and they were just different sounds. So it was a different mission in that regard. And I think a lot of missions have gang violence, and a lot of missions, there are definitely missions that are more violent or dangerous than mine. But there was you always had to be careful. You always had to know where you were going, at what times of night, and even in the day. If you went in a certain place during the day, you were in danger of being hurt. So you always had to be cautious, always had to be careful, always had to be conscious of where you were and what you were doing. So gangs, crime, it's an interesting, really interesting place. So to start it off, in the States, we're always hating on our government leaders. It doesn't matter who's in office, and if they're doing good things, someone's going to hate on them, right? And the same way in El Salvador. But the government, it's really cool, because in our mission binders that they gave us at the very, very beginning of the mission, they gave us the dedication of the land for the preaching of the gospel. And it was the second dedication because in El Salvador's history, there was a pretty intense civil war that happened that kind of destroyed the country. And it's left a really big mark on people. People talk about it all the time. So it's a really big part of their heritage and their history. But after that happened, and after the gospel started getting taught there again, Neal A. Maxwell actually was the one, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm almost positive it was Neal A. Maxwell, who rededicated the land for the preaching of the gospel. And in one part of it, he said, "We bless the leaders of this country, and we thank God for the privilege to bestow this great blessing on this country, that Satan will never have hold over the hearts of the leaders of this country." So the leaders of the country, going off that blessing, which is pretty cool to see in the dedication of a whole country, which is pretty cool to see, that the leaders will always be righteous. But, with the best interests of the people. But, Satan always finds a way to wreak havoc. And the gangs are huge. As far as, advice to anyone that's going there, have a really good reason for why you're going. And if you don't, I wouldn't go. There's some pretty cool things to see in El Salvador. There's some pretty places, and there's beach resorts. But and there's touristy things to do. There are really, really world class like ruins and just like crazy, amazing views to see. But like my parents asked if they wanted if I wanted them to come pick me up, and I was like, definitely not. I do not want you anywhere near this country. I was like, I don't want you anywhere near a bus because it's just dangerous. There are gangsters, I should say, everywhere. And there's two main gangs. There's 18, which is like from Guatemala, and then there's MS-13, which is like the Salvadoranian gang. And I think National Graphic actually a couple years back did a documentary on them, and the documentary was called The Most Dangerous Gang in the World, because they are just ruthless. And they just fight, them and MS-13. 18 is comprised of sixes, and they've got like all their hand symbols and stuff. But so it's 18, if you divide it by 3, is 3 sixes. So they're kind of scary. Like, they're a really scary gang because they're like kind of more devil worshippers. And not to scare anyone, because, you know, no missionaries, I don't think, as far as I know, have ever been killed by like gang members or anything. But I got robbed. Like, I got jumped multiple times. They took my shoes when I had like 2 weeks in the mission. They're like, give me your shoes. And it was at gunpoint, and I was like, well, not much I can do. Like, here's my shoes. I didn't really understand what he was saying, because he said zapatos, and that was like the only word I could understand. I was like, what? Shoes? My companion was like, yeah, he wants your shoes. And they weren't nice shoes either. I was like, wow, these are like not the nicest shoes, but here you go. Like, here's my shoes. And I got jumped in like a bus a couple times. But most of the time, as you kind of hear like across missions, like the gangs would kind of like look out for you, because they kind of have respect for you. Like, you're away from your family, you're working, and you're working for God. And a lot of gang members are like devout Catholics, or like they have the prophetic and like evangelist church. That's what they call it down there. So it doesn't translate super well, but so they could be members of that church, which is just a Christian denomination. But the gang members they're interesting because they believe in God, a lot of them, but they are not really keeping a lot of his commandments, because it's pretty brutal. There are a lot of killings and murders that go down there, and the gangs kind of run the country. When I had my first change, they put what was called a curfew on the whole country, and they said, look, if you're not in by 5 o'clock, we're going to kill you. And it's kind of their way of showing the government, like, you can do whatever you want to like search us out, and we're going to show you that we're in power. And so they put a curfew on the country, and that was a crazy experience, because we were like, we didn't have cell phones, so we're just like out trucking around, and all of a sudden we're like, well, why isn't anyone like here? And we're sitting at the bus stop, and we're just like waiting, and all of a sudden like buses, we're trying to flag them down, and buses are just like flying by, just at Mach 9, and no one's in them. And so you sit on the side of a road in El Salvador, and to like flag a bus down, you like hold out your hand, and you just like point your finger down. It's like really funny. So you're just like do this all the time. And they were just flying by, and we were trying to get somewhere, and we're like, well, what's going on? So a member saw us like from the window, and like came out and was like, look, they put a curfew on the country. You got to get home. And so we were pretty close to home. So we ran home and got in, called our zone leaders, and we were like, hey, we didn't know. And they're like, yeah, it's been like you were supposed to be inside like half an hour ago. So my first area was relatively dangerous. It was actually really nice where I lived, but outside of it, it was just super dangerous, because it was a suburb of San Salvador, and that was like where a ton of gangs were in El Salvador, or in San Salvador, and all the suburbs was just gang riddled. So it was kind of like crazy. Once you got like farther to the outskirts, there were less gangs, but they still had a huge presence everywhere. But yeah, there were lots of gang members, lots of members of the church are gang members, especially youth. They were involved in gangs, and so it was kind of hard, because you're not supposed to work with them or teach them. So you'd go and you'd do like divisions, and you'd have like a kid who's 18 and a kid who's getting ready to go on a mission, and you'd like go and do divisions with them with your companion, just to like introduce them to the mission, and if you had like too many appointments to cover, and come to find out, like 2 weeks later, like one of the kids you've been working with is like a member of the gang. So it's a really weird thing. It's a really, really weird situation. The gangs are very, very powerful. There's graffiti everywhere. And it's not like pretty graffiti like here. It's just graffiti that's basically marking gang territory. And then they'll cross out each other's gang markings and put their own, and that starts like a battle and stuff. A tattoo down there is like a symbol of being a gangster. So even if you just have like one tattoo, it means like you're a gangster. So people don't have tattoos down there normally. But it's kind of interesting for people that come from the States and like get deported, or have been in the States for a long time and they go down to visit, because a lot of people have tattoos here in the States and they'll go down. And police officers there don't ask questions. If they see someone with a tattoo, they pretty much just beat the tar out of them, which is crazy. And so, a tattoo is a symbol of a gang member. Kind of like what I was saying before. I can't remember what the question was, but I was telling you about how there are armed guards outside of every store. That's the reason why, because there are so many gang members and so many, like stick-ups and so many drive-by shootings and so many just like everything. And that's also why the army is always patrolling the street. And it's kind of sad because El Salvador's army is used pretty much primarily to like keep gang violence to a minimum and to search out gangsters and beat the trash out of them and put them in jail, right? There was definitely a lot of snakes. There was definitely like a ton of spiders. I remember there was this one area where there were spiders that were just like the size of a dinner plate. And they lived in these people's houses. Like there were these huge, a smaller dinner plate, but it's like a good, like that big. And the people would like catch flies or like, see insects, and they would catch them and like throw them into the web for these spiders. Like they like had them as pets. So that was weird. That was kind of crazy. Huge spiders. There were tons of bats, tons of lizards. I mean, I remember a lizard that was like that big that was just in my house one night when we got home, and it was in like a coastal kind of region. Every once in a while you'd see like a sort of like, they had, I don't even know what the translation is in English, but it's taquasin. It's like a kind of like a coyote fox kind of thing, and they had those. So those were like around. They didn't have like big animals like bears or anything. I saw like one deer on my mission, just like one time in the middle of the night. And there's a ton of dogs. There's dogs everywhere. And they have like a few cats, but mostly dogs, because like they're just stray. And so then, they like mate, and there's tons more dogs. And they're all just like super malnourished. You can see their ribs, and people like kick them and throw rocks at them. And so they're just like all kind of afraid of people. So that was kind of weird. There's just dogs everywhere. But there were a ton of mice and like rats. There was a rat in my house once that we killed because it would like eat our stuff. And one night we were sitting there taking numbers at night, and we hear something like on the fridge, and I'm like, that's the rat. So we run over and hit the fridge, and we hear it jump off, and it starts like scurrying away. So my companion grabs a broom, and he like hits it back towards me, and I grab a broom, and we just like killed it with brooms. It was crazy. The broom splittered it into like 3 pieces, and it was just crazy. And like, we weren't being like cruel or anything, but like, the rats can carry diseases and fleas and stuff, so we're just like trying to get it, because it would get into our house if like we didn't kill it, because they can climb, like go under the doors, the metal doors. There's not like a lot of weather stripping or like airtight, sealed kind of stuff down in El Salvador. So, yeah, that happened in multiple houses where there were rats or mice, and you'd have to like kill them. One kind of gross story is one time we remember in my house, it was just like the grossest smell. I was like, I've taken out the trash, like it must be the neighbors. I was like searching through everywhere, but it smelled like rotting. So after like 3 weeks of that, we finally find underneath, they've got these things called pilas in El Salvador that are like concrete boxes of water, and then on each side it's got like a wash basin where you can do your dishes or your laundry. And well, on one of the sides we had like a dish holder for like dishes so they could dry and for like silverware, but it kind of like filled up the whole thing, and it was like flush with the back and with the sides. And I remember I was like looking at it, and I saw like a little thing like coming up out of the back, and I picked it up, and there was a rotting, like maggot infested mouse, and it had been under our dishes the whole time. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I like called my companion, he comes over and he's just like he was gonna throw up, and it was the grossest experience. Oh, it was so gross. But got that cleaned up. So there's like tons of mice. Ants everywhere. If you ever left like your cereal out, there were like there's these tiny little like clear ants, and they just like form these lines, and they all follow in the same line. So sometimes it's kind of fun to like run your finger through the line, and then they'd like all go crazy, and they had no idea what to do. They'd like communicate and get back together. But they could like eat through cardboard and eat through like the plastic in your cereal box. So you had to put anything that you didn't want them to eat through in the fridge, because otherwise they just eat through it. I mean, they were crazy. They ate through like tinfoil. I mean, there were some determined little ants. But yeah, they would just get everywhere. I'm trying to think if there were any like big kind of wildlife things. There wasn't anything like in Brazil, like jaguars or like lions or bears. I don't know. But yeah, there was like a lot of snakes and stuff like that. So it's fun. The parasites it's crazy because like, first off, well, one of the symptoms, one way that you kind of know, is just like you have to go to the bathroom a ton. But it's like, it's just different because it's like, I mean, yeah, without getting too graphic, like when someone has normal diarrhea, it's just like, stuff goes through them quick. When you have parasites, it's almost just like, I mean, you eat something and it automatically goes through you. I mean, it's just the most surreal thing. For example, I think one time I had to use the bathroom like 11 times in an hour. And so it's really hard. I mean, it's hard to go and work because you're constantly like having to use the bathroom, Another way that you can tell is I knew that something was weird, and this was just a personal thing. I knew something was weird because my stomach like hurt, but not just like, oh, I have like a stomach ache. It was kind of like a stabbing pain in my stomach. And I was just like, this is like a weird pain. I do not know what's going on here. And so, I called the nurse. She had me go get a test done, and sure enough, I had parasites. And so that was really weird. And I think because you're going to the bathroom all the time, another like symptom, but I think not only because of that, but also because these parasites are just like taking all of your nutrients, you get really dehydrated and you just lose a ton of energy because you're eating food and you're getting dehydrated because you have to use the bathroom so much, but not only are you just losing a lot of water, but you're not getting any nutrients because all the parasites are like stealing them. And that's like what they thrive on, right? That's what they grow from. And so that was like, it was like during the mission, it was just kind of like whatever, they'd always say, if you haven't pooped your pants as a missionary, you're not a real missionary. That's what they said in my mission. And sure enough, that happened to me. Like it happened like a couple times. But it was, I mean, in the mission, it was just kind of like, whoa, this is like, I have parasites. This is like, what? Like, how does this even happen? This is cool. Like it never was that big a deal. You know, it was very unfortunate, like, and very uncomfortable. But it wasn't like, oh man, I wish I was like at home right now, you know, in the States where like I wouldn't have parasites. It was kind of like this. I mean, I think that's kind of a personal thing too. I just thought it was cool. Like I was like suffering this crazy thing that I was never going to have to like be able to suffer again. I don't know, you know, who knows where life will take me, but yeah, I really thought it was like kind of a cool experience, but at the same time, it was just like you had to be super careful because you just never knew when all of a sudden you're gonna have to use the bathroom, and it wasn't like you could tell. Like kind of like when you're sick to your stomach and have diarrhea or something, you can kind of tell. You're like, oh yeah, like I'll probably have to use the restroom in 20 minutes or something. You know, like you can kind of tell it starts to come on. With parasites, all of a sudden it's just like, oh my gosh. And so you just like start booking it for like the nearest bathroom. But if you're out in the boonies, sometimes it's like, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. No one has toilets. Your house is way, way far away. So we often would, I mean, I don't think I ever did this, but we were told as missionaries, like from our mission prison, to like carry toilet paper around all the time, not only for like situations where you can't find a restroom, but also because like a lot of people didn't have toilet paper. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. I never had to do that, but I knew missionaries that did. As far as like not getting them, just be really, in some ways, I'm hesitant like to like even give this advice because in some ways it's almost inevitable. And I say that for one reason, because people will make you food, or you know, you schedule an appointment with someone, and it's not like a dinner appointment, it's not like a lunch appointment or anything. They're not inviting you over to eat, and you get there and they have something made for you, and it was super hard for me. You know, there were certain things that like I just never did eat, and I was very, very good about that. Like pork, I think I talked about pork last time, and how that has some parasites, like brain parasites, that can be super, super dangerous. But it was hard for me to see a family that was living in such poverty make something for me and like be super excited to give it to me, and then me like turn it down. So there were a lot of times when, like, you know, there were certain things that, like, I would eat the food, and there were certain things that I wouldn't eat that I knew were probably worse than others, like certain fruits, or, you know, lettuce. I tried to stay away from lettuce, like, in salad, but sometimes it was almost just, like, unavoidable. So you know that it's been prepared using tap water, which has amoebas in it, and can have, like, mosquito larvae, so worms, right? And you know it's been prepared using that stuff, but I could never really just be like, you know what, I know you're poor and you get paid $4 a day and you probably spent 2 of them on this, but I'm not going to eat it, you know? So that was really difficult. But advice that I would give you is, you know, let people know. If someone's going to ask you, hey, can we have you over for lunch? Just be like, yeah, that would be awesome. We can't, you know, drink this. We can't do this. We can't eat this because of these reasons. And, you know, I'd always pull the card, yeah, I'm just like a little white gringo and like my stomach's really weak, like I can't handle it. And people laugh, you know, so it's not like an awkward situation. Because the Latin people are so loving. Like that's what they want to give you stuff. Like they want, even people that like weren't members, they wanted you in a way to like be part of their family. Like they're just so loving and accepting. So to turn them down can oftentimes hurt their feelings if you don't do it right. And so you have to be very careful with that. And also, it just always made me feel bad because I was like, these people are super poor. And they just spent like a ton of money relatively on that meal. And like, I'm going to say no, you know? So it was a very, for me, it was a super touchy subject. There were some missionaries that they were just like, you know what? I'm not going to eat that because it's going to make me sick, whatever. And a lot of times I would sit there and I'd sit down and I'd be like, Heavenly Father, please just don't let me get sick. I'm not seeking to drink this thing or eat this thing. Just don't let me get sick. And I got parasites and amoebas towards the beginning of my mission, and then I never really ran into them again. Now parasites, you can take the balm is what they call it. I don't know if anyone else has called it that, but the balm is like a pill that you take that kind of just like kills everything inside of you, like your intestines and in your stomach and everything. And so it kind of just like flushes everything out, but with like crazy chemicals that just kill everything. But parasites can like hide in the folds of your intestines. So even still, every once in a while, like I'll be completely fine, like not gone out to eat and gotten, like having the possibility of gotten food poisoning, and all of a sudden it's just like, whoa, oh my gosh. So they'll let you know that they're still there. They'll let you know that you guys are still friends every once in a while. But yeah, like just be careful with what you eat. That's always like prevention, right? Is always a lot easier than cleaning up, which is sometimes hard with parasites because they can be elusive. But yeah, I mean, I never worried like, oh no, am I gonna get parasites and then die? It was just kind of like, well. Like, I kind of just took it as, like, part of the mission. It was something that was going to happen. But, yeah, I think, and definitely this was something that, I did before my mission, but I guess I wasn't, like, super gung-ho about it. But washing your hands. Like, we would wash our hands after everything. And carry around, like, hand sanitizer just because, like, you're working in the dirt helping someone in service. Or, just knocking doors. And it's so dirty that you think it's just dirt because, like, if I go outside and play in the dirt or go run around in the park and I come home, like here, I don't usually wash my hands if I'm just going to like, eat something. Like, I might, but if I'm not super dirty, I'm just like, oh, whatever, I'll just eat it. Because it's a lot more sanitary here, like in the States. There's a lot more, like, health regulations and sanitation stuff. Down there, it's not, really. There's just, like, trash everywhere. And dirt everywhere, and I mean, nasty landfill stuff everywhere. So you can't. So you have to wash your hands really, really well and a lot. And if you do, usually you didn't get sick. So that was pretty cool. I think it does because, like, and obviously it's been a while now. Not since I got back from my mission, because it's only been like a year and a few months, but it's been a while since, like, before my mission. And honestly, as weird as it sounds, I don't remember what it felt like to just like not have that happen, because I got parasites so early in my mission that from then on, that's kind of like how my stomach felt. So I'm not sure if it's that my stomach feels any different. But definitely there are times when all of a sudden I'll just be like, whoa, like, I'm not sick, I've been eating healthy, I've been hydrating myself, and all of a sudden, like, you're about to blow up. Like, it just is it's really weird. It's really weird. And I've talked to a couple other of my friends, one that served in Argentina, they got parasites pretty bad, and a couple other friends that served in, like, Honduras and Guatemala, which I think Central America is, like, a lot poorer than most countries in South America. Well, than a lot of countries in the world. I bet Africa trumps them pretty bad. But a lot of kids that I served with, I mean, it was pretty common to get parasites, Like, you'd see a kid at like district meeting or zone meeting, and he'd kind of like have this look on his face, or be like kind of like sweating, like kind of pale, And you'd be like, what's up, man? Like, do you have parasites? And he'd be like, yeah, I just feel sick, like out of energy, like really, really tired. So, there are some times when even today I will get super, super, super tired for like no reason, and I'm like, I wonder if it's like because of that. I don't know if there's any direct correlation to that, but I do know that the balm doesn't kill all of them, because there are parasites that can hide away in your intestines, and they told us that as we were coming home. And then I even like asked some doctors, like when I got checkup exams when I came home from my mission. And so, yeah, I know that they're probably, at least for me, I'm pretty sure that they're like still there in my stomach, which is crazy, but this is kind of funny. But yeah, so like it definitely, like, every once in a while they'll just let you know you're there. And one of my roommates, dads, my old roommate, we don't live together anymore. He served his mission in Argentina. And before my mission, he told me this story about one time when he was like coming home from like a business trip, and one of those things came on, and he was in rush hour traffic, nowhere to go, and he like pooped himself in his car. And he had just bought like a new car. And I remember thinking, what on earth? Like, how come he couldn't like just hold it? Because I'd never like experienced anything like that. And it's like you can't. It's like the weirdest experience. So like, even he to this day says like every once in a while, just like goes. So it's kind of funny. Oh man, there's so much to talk about food, and it's kind of crazy because in El Salvador, there are so many differences. So there's a ton of differences in any Latin American country. So like in Central America and South America and Mexico between like the words. One word in El Salvador means a completely different thing in Honduras, and it means a completely different thing in Costa Rica. And so that was always kind of fun because you'd go to like a different place, and I remember, in El Salvador, at every meal they eat tortillas that are like this. They're corn tortillas, and they're just like this big, and they're like that thick, and it's just like of corn flour. And like I kind of was wondering why that they would like always eat these, and it's just because I think they get so many carbs from it that the work that they do there, the majority of the Salvadorian people, is like manual labor. Everyone there walks around with a machete on their hip. So that was kind of scary when I first got there. And then aside from that, we haven't really addressed this, but like there's a ton of gangs. I mean, the gang problem there is unreal, and so we can talk about that later. But in front of a lot of stores, any bank, any utility, water, electricity, and just in front of almost every single store, there is an armed security guard with like a sawed-off shotgun or like a machine gun, and then there's soldiers constantly patrolling the streets, right? So that was kind of a little tangent, but their work is really hard. So a lot of their food is just like high caloric intake. Like they just try and get as many calories as they can so they can keep working. They all work, a lot of them work in the coffee fields, which is just grueling. We would go out and help them every once in a while. That is tough work. And these guys make a living out of it. They do it from sun up to sundown. And they just get paid like $3 a day, which is horrible because they use American currency down there. They used to have the colon. That was their currency. But a couple years back, they switched to the dollar, which kind of had a lot of negative side effects for their economy because they used to be able to buy everything and have a lot. They used to just be very comfortable. They could, almost anyone could have all the food that they wanted. But once they switched to the dollar, the people selling still sold in the amount that they sold in the cologne. But now it was the dollar, and they were only getting paid $4 when they were getting paid like 50 colognes each day. So all of a sudden, no one has any money for anything. So okay, that was kind of crazy. Another side tangent, but they've got these things called pupusas down in El Salvador, and they are delicious. I mean, it's the same concept as that tortilla. And I learned how to make them. So we'd be contacting and see a lady making tortillas, and I'd be like, "Hey, let me help you," and just run over there, and she's just shocked because some white boy's like, "Who is this kid?" And I run over there, and I'm making tortillas with her and just talking with her about the gospel, which is so fun. But the pupusas are like, you make a tortilla, you like kind of like beat the dough down into like a little saucer, and then you like make a cup with your hand. You kind of punch it so the dough's like this, and then you put like beans and cheese and like chicken inside, and then you close it up and you flatten it out again, and then you put it on the little saucer. They call them comals, like this big kind of like frying pan dish to cook, and they were the most delicious things ever. Towards the end of my mission, I would eat like 3 in the morning and like 5 at night. I ate so many pupusas because they are so good. And they make pupusas like shrimp pupusas, bacon pupusas, garlic pupusas. Like they make pupusas out of anything you can think of. So it was awesome. Like the main ones are like bean and cheese. They do one that's called loroco, which is like this herb thing that they sell down there or have down there. I'm sure that we have it here. I just don't know what it's called in English. And then they do like chicken. And then the most famous ones down there are chicharrón, which is like pork. But we couldn't eat pork down there because it had a lot of parasites. because it was just raised like drinking water from the nasty gutter and eating trash and stuff. So, you know, they would always talk about this one parasite that the pork, like the pig, carried, which was like a parasitic worm that would like go into your brain, and it would like eat parts of your brain, and then like, you know, eat like the back of like someone's eye, and they would like constantly have a headache. So it was like a real thing, these worms, and it was crazy. So I stayed away from pork, but we had a lot of rules for food. Like we had to always drink purified water, which is common in a lot of countries, but we couldn't eat like lettuce, anything that they had to wash with water. We couldn't eat a lot of fruit because there were a lot of pores, so it was hard to clean them well. We could if we like soaked them in water with bleach in it, but I was never like, when I got home at night, I was exhausted. And I was like, the only thing I wanted to do was take the numbers for the day and then like plan, study a little bit and go to bed. Like I was not going to eat, right? Or take the time to soak fruit in bleach water. I was like, that's going to take forever. So when I first got there, my companion, he was a native. So like natives, oftentimes were, as far as the food rules go, they were not super obedient in like my experience. Because they were like, I've been eating this like forever. It's like, I've always eaten chicharron. Like, I don't like, who's not going to eat that? So they'd like eat whatever. And so we'd go over to investigators' houses, my first area. And they're like, oh, we made a salad. And I like, and they go over the health rules the very first day, but you're in shock. You know, you have no idea what's going on. So you don't remember everything. But I was like, I think I remember something about lettuce, but like, I'm not sure if we can't eat it or like if I'm supposed to wash it well. I don't remember. So they give me this salad and I look at my companion. He's like, oh yeah. So I'm just like chowing down. He would always drink tap water because like, that's what he grew up drinking. He didn't drink filtered water. So I'm just drinking tap water. And by the end of my first change, I had like amoebas and parasites, and so I just was having a rough time, right? And you know, not to be vulgar in any way, but it was anything that went in just came right out. I could not keep any food down at all, well, in my body, because either the parasites would just tear through it in my stomach, or the amoebas were just making my intestines and my like system just go crazy. So it was crazy. Like it was a really fun way to start the mission, just because it was like, I'm already sick. Like this is crazy. This is awesome. And I'd like meet my buddies at district meeting, because one of my mission MTC companions was in my first district. So we'd like get together and I'd be like, dude, I'm like so sick. And he's like, I am too. I was like, it's so cool. I was like, this is the mission. Like this is what everyone would talk about. And so other than that, I mean, they have, the food there is really simple. They have some things that some people make really, really like complicated, I guess, or like really delicate food. I don't know how you say that, but just like they like cuisine, I guess they sometimes can make. But most of the time, every morning we'd eat like beans, and they liquefy their beans. So they put all their beans in a blender and just liquefy it up. So we'd eat liquefied beans with rice, and then like this cream. They've got this cream down there that everyone's like, oh yeah, it's like sour cream, but it's like 3,000 times better, and it's like not super sour like sour cream. So it's just this like super special cream that they eat, and they mix it with everything, and then they always eat plátanos fritos, like fried bananas, fried plantains, because like there are just fruit trees everywhere. And there's huge banana trees and huge mango trees and huge like avocado trees, and there's a ton of other fruit names that I don't know, like jocotes and mamones, and they have all these different fruits that, because the soil is so fertile, they just grow. Like people will eat a mango, throw the seed, and in like a year or two, there's like a massive mango tree. And that's like not even a joke. They have these humongous trees, and they have fruit trees that grow so quickly because the soil is so fertile. So it's like super cool. It's awesome. So we'd just be walking, and like a mango would fall off of a random like mango tree. You just pick it up and eat it. Or like you'd be like teaching investigators or street contacting, and they'd just be like, have you guys eeten today? We're like, no. They're like, Well, here's like a bunch of mangoes, and they just give you a bag full of like enormous mangoes or avocados, and you just eat them the rest of the day as you're walking around, or you wait till you get home. Or, I mean, they just have so much fruit down there. So, breakfast we'd eat like beans and rice, and like fried bananas, and that was just delicious. But in the afternoon, we'd usually eat something similar. Like there was always almost rice, and there was always almost beans or like fried bananas. But there was always some kind of meat. They eat lots of meat, specifically chicken. There's like a saying down there. I don't know if it translates like perfectly, but it's a house without chickens or chicks is without grace in God's eyes. And it was like, whoa. It's like, that's kind of weird. But it's just every house has chickens. They all have chickens. Because they wait for the chickens to lay eggs. So there's other chickens and little chicks running around. And then they kill the chickens and eat them. So they always have chickens. And there's always chicken. Like they make tons of chicken soup with like the whole chicken in there. So you'll get like a chicken leg or like the head and like the eyes or like... it's just crazy. They eat tons of fish as well. And they like leave the eyes in, so you're like poking out the eyes and eating them, and like you just like pick all like the meat you can off of it, and like they don't take any of the bones out. Like they like don't really like gut them either. Like you just kind of eat the fish as is, which is like cool. It was awesome. They have some really cool desserts. One's called a buñuelo, which is like the most delicious thing ever. It's yuca. So yuca is like a root that they would eat, which is like delicious. So, these street vendors have these bags, and they put yuca in them, and they like shake them up with salsa, and that's like one of the really common ways to eat them. But in this one area of my mission, they had what was called buñuelos, which in another part of the country meant something completely different. So it was kind of funny. But these buñuelos they would like smash up the yuca, and then they would fry it, like deep fry it into these balls, and then like these yuca balls, and then they would put them in bags and add this like syrup juice thing that was red, that it was the most delicious thing. I think I gained like 15 pounds in that area just eating buñuelos. They were so delicious. I would just like be walking around, like someone would slam the door in our face, and I'd be like, you know what, we need to pick me up, let's go get buñuelos. So we'd go get buñuelos, and oh, they were delicious. They were so good. So they eat like, they've got some really, really good desserts. They always do what's that called? The arroz con leche, rice and milk. So they do the rice milk thing, which is delicious. And they'll make like rice pudding every once in a while. Not a ton. Something they do that's kind of funny, I always thought was funny, was like on holidays, they'll eat like chicken sandwiches. That's what they eat. They call them panes con pollo. And you're like, okay, it's like a chicken sandwich. And so they'll make these huge subs, and they'll just load them with chicken. And sometimes they'll even throw turkey in there. So you're just like, what? It's like not really a chicken sandwich. They'll throw turkey in there, and then they just put tons of lettuce on it, and like tons of radishes and tons of carrots. So this thing is just this massive sub. I mean, it puts Subway and Blimpies and everything to shame. And then they douse it in this like chicken gravy thing that they make. And it is the most delicious thing in the world. When I first heard it, I was like, okay, well, for Christmas we're going to eat chicken sandwiches. Like, okay, cool. But like, oh my gosh, it was delicious. They're so good. And as a missionary, as in the States, I'm sure we ate a little bit less than the States missionaries, but we would be like running around because people wanted to give us dinner appointments on holidays, and you're meeting with like families that you're teaching. By the end of it, you're just about to explode. And these things are so big, and everyone does them. Everyone does panes con pollo. I think the craziest thing I ate was my first Christmas. Not craziest. I had some pretty crazy stuff. But one of the coolest things that I ate was like my first Christmas was only 5 days into the mission field, because I got out there on December 20th. And I remember we ate duck. We ate like fried duck, and like we ate like the duck tongue and like the duck feet and stuff. Duck feet were like the weirdest, rubberiest thing, and the duck tongue was like really squishy. But the duck itself was delicious. So good. Way good. And they eat a lot of like they'll do like stuffed peppers. You'll eat stuffed peppers a lot, which are really good, and they're like breaded. Or they'll eat like breaded chicken. And they do eat beef every once in a while, but it's not as much as the other stuff. They've got stuff that like people know of, like from Mexico. They have empanadas, and they have like quesadillas, and they have like other stuff like that. But they all have different meanings. Like an empanada is kind of the same as a Mexican one, but a tamale completely different. It's like it's kind of like the same form, but it's mostly just like liquefied corn flour that they like put and wrap in like banana leaves and then put and like set them to cook. And it's like, oh, they're kind of gross. They were just like always like really squishy, and like, oh, I did not like them at first. By the end of my mission, I got to like them, especially when they would do one. They called it a ticuco, and it was like a tamale but with just beans inside. So it was like a little bit of that corn flour stuff, but just like beans and like mixed with chicken on the inside, and it was delicious. And they would do, they would make, so a quesadilla is just sweetbread. It's like, it's kind of like cornbread here for us, but like sweeter. So it's like kind of that same consistency, but like really, really sweet and just delicious. I mean, when people would make us quesadilla, it was a special occasion. Like, awesome. Loved it. Trying to think of any more foods I ate in El Salvador. I'm sure there's tons of them. We made one called, there's not really a translation. The English translation is like pinches, because they would take a tortilla that they would make and they would like pinch it just so there were like openings in it so you could kind of stuff stuff in it. And then you would like cover that in beans and then put shredded chicken on it that was like cooked. And then you would put like guacamole avocado on top of that. Then you would put cheese on it, and then you would like cover it in like chili sauce, and it was so good. It was like, I only ate those in like one area of mine because they were like, it was harder to make because it was a wealthier area. So in the wealthier area, they had money to make them. That was delicious. But, and like I never served in Belize, kind of like I was saying, but I went over there. And they ate these things called fry jacks, which were like these big, like deep fried flour tortillas filled with like kind of the same as like a pupusa. It's like chicken and beans and cheese, but it was just like on a massive scale, and it was way more deep fried. Like a pupusa is just like cooked. It was deep fried in like oil and stuff. It was super greasy, but it was delicious. So that's kind of what I remember from like Belize is like the good food. I was only there for a week, but so good. I loved the food. And so this isn't so much about the food, but the people there. I mean, we'd be contacting, and everyone invites you in. Everyone invites you in to either just talk, and I guess not everyone invites you in because we definitely got the door slammed in our face like every missionary, but I mean, we would be contacting, and someone would say, you know what, I'm a devout Catholic. I don't really want anything to do with your church, but have you eaten dinner tonight? And we'd be like, no. So like at the end of my mission, I kind of honestly like stopped saying yes, because sometimes you would just like go in there and they'd feed you and you'd like kind of waste time. But at the beginning of my mission, I'd be like, no, like why? And they'd be like, oh, okay, come on in. Then they'd like yell to their little kid, go to the store and get this for the missionaries. We'd be like, what? Like they're members of a different church. And they'd just like make us like beans and rice, and then they'd go and buy like a soda, because every meal they go and either get a Coke or like a Fanta. But as missionaries, we couldn't drink Coca-Cola for some reason, but we could drink like Fanta and other like sodas. So we'd always like have a Fanta there, like orange Fanta. That's like the only Fanta they have, but it's delicious because it's made with like cane sugar or something outside of the States, so it's way better than the Fanta here. I came back and tried it, and I was like, this is disgusting. I don't even like it. But the people there are just super hospitable. Like everyone has no money, but they all try and give you as much as they can, which is super cool. Kind of like the food dynamic. Like there are people everywhere on the streets with like these huge flat, kind of like massive frying pans, just like hot plates, I guess you could call them. And there's just constantly ladies out there just making tortillas, and people are going and buying them, and so they're just always making tortillas, and people go place an order and be like, hey, I'll be back in 20 minutes, and come with their like little cloths and wrap up their tortillas and go back and have, you know, breakfast. And then they'll do the same for lunch, and they'll do the same for dinner, and the same with pupusas. So there's always people out making food. And that was like kind of cool. I just loved the dynamic of El Salvador because it was like chaotic, like all the time. Like my family, there's 9 of us in my family, so I have 6 brothers and sisters. So there's like always something going on, and so like El Salvador was perfect for me because there's always crazy stuff going on, and there's people everywhere, tons of people to talk to. But it was fun. I liked it. I mean, I loved the Spanish that was spoken there. One of my favorite things about the mission was learning Spanish. So I was just like always walking around like asking people how to say stuff, and asking like that was one of my favorite contacting things. Like, hey, how do you say this word? And they'd like help me, and like, you know, they start helping you, and so, you know, then it's like, oh, like this person like helped me out, so they're like a pretty cool person. So you start talking to them and talking to them about the gospel, and so it was a really cool experience. But they've got some really, really funny things. So to begin, a lot of the people there aren't extremely educated. They're doing a really, really big push for education in their country. So they're trying to educate as many people as they can, and make like college education accessible to everyone. Because the older generation, a lot of them didn't go to college. So that's changing. And hopefully it will get to the point where it is very uncommon for them to not go to college, which is good. But they sometimes they like say the words wrong. So for example, in Spanish, difference is diferencia, but they would say diferencia. They'd like add little like extra I's and E's in there, and so you're like, oh, well, what? And they're like, what is that? And so you'd say it the right way, and they'd be like, no, it's diferencia. And you're like, no, it's not. It is not that. And it was just really funny because they would correct you to make you wrong, and you'd be like, no, it's not that way. For example, this is my favorite. They would say in Spanish, a B and a V have basically the same sound. It's almost very literally, it's just the same exact sound. And so in El Salvador, when you were spelling something, they would say big B or little b. So they didn't have, like, big B was like the B that we know, and little b was V. And so they would say B grande or B pequeña. And so you'd be like, what? And missionaries that would come that were Latins, like from El Salvador or from like Guatemala or Honduras, they would be like, what on earth are they saying? B pequeña? And so, because it's called uve, like it's V. But because it makes the same sound and people aren't cultured, they just don't know. They know that it's like spelled differently because they've like seen it, but a lot of people can't write and a lot of people can't read. So yeah, there's a really high illiteracy rate. But like so that was super funny. That was always fun to like run into people who were like trying to like correct you, and you're like, dude, like I know like you speak Spanish way better than I do, but this is not right. Like you can't say it like that. They speak in Vos, which is pretty typical of Central America. Well, at least Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and I think Nicaragua. But like Mexico, Belize speaks English, Spanish, and Creole. Panama and like the rest of the countries, almost all of them speak in tu. So Vos is just like another way of conjugating an impersonal you. So if I was just speaking with you, I would speak to you in Vos. Obviously, as missionaries, we had to speak in like the more formal usted. But yeah, in El Salvador they speak in Vos, which was fun to just like listen to it because it's quick and dirty Spanish. Like tu, you conjugate it, and it's like another conjugation. And Vos pretty much is just like chopping off the end of a verb and adding an s, and then like accenting the last vowel. So it's really fun to speak in Vos, and it's just like quick and kind of dirty. But I like that kind of Spanish. Like, it was just so fun to speak. And they speak so much slang. They are the Salvadorian people as a whole, what I found is they're very like prankster jokers. Like, they love to joke around, they love to play pranks, they love to just like tease, constantly teasing all the time. And so they were really funny in the way they spoke with like slang, because if they were speaking to me, if it was an adult, they would speak very like dignified. But if they were speaking to a kid, it was just almost an entirely different language, in the sense that all the vocabulary just completely switched and they were speaking just total slang. And you're like, whoa, this is so weird. You listen to them, and they're over there doing like these crazy things, like with their voice inflection when they would speak to like kids. With us, it was very dignified, very respectful. Down there, they like whistle when they try to like get a hold of someone's attention. So they do a lot of whistling, and it's like really shrill and like high pitched. They're all super, super good at whistling. And so, yeah, like, they do the funniest things. This isn't exactly whistling, but to get your attention, they don't say, hey. That's like kind of, I guess, disrespectful. What they do is they go, ch-ch-ch-ch, and they like wave their hand down at you like this. So you'll be like walking in the street and they'll be like, ch-ch-ch. And after a while, you like get used to it. But at the beginning of my mission, I had no idea what they were doing. I was just like, they were making the weirdest noises. Like, what is going on? And then they would get frustrated or offended because you didn't know. And they're like, well, this kid just thinks he's a man, doesn't want to talk to me. You're like, I have no idea what you're doing. You're like hissing at me. One really cool thing that they do with Spanish, well, not cool thing, it's just kind of funny, quirky, is that they chop off, they like replace all of their S's with J's. So to say like, ¿qué pasó?, which means like, hey, what happened? Or like, what's up? They would say, ¿qué pasó? They just like don't pronounce it. It's almost just like air coming out. Like, oh, ¿qué pasó? Or like, yeah, it's like, it's kind of hard to explain not just speaking Spanish, right? But they just chop off the S and replace it with a J, which is super funny. And that's how I learned how to speak. So when I came home, people were like, well, why don't you ever say the S? I was like, well, that's how we speak down there. And I thought that's not how everyone did, but I thought maybe that's how all natives did. But then one thing that's really cool, and they do this, I think, in all Central American countries and maybe all South American Spanish-speaking countries, they have what's called Spanish Pig Latin, at least in El Salvador. And what they do is they'll take a word, and after a vowel, they'll put a certain like consonant or group of consonants in there, and then they'll repeat the vowel. So to say ¿qué pasó?, you pick a consonant group or just a single consonant. So I would always pick the CH, so the ch. So you would say like ¿qué pasó?, turns into ¿qué pacha socho? And so it was like they used it, so if you're speaking it really fast, then no one else could understand you. And so I learned how to speak in that with a couple of my comps, and we would just constantly speak in it because it was fun. Like, it was fun practice, and it was like something that I could do once my Spanish was good, to like keep progressing. But that's super, super funny. It's so fun to hear them speak in that because they are so fast. Like, I got pretty dang fast on my mission, but they are just like blisteringly fast, and they speak in the Spanish Pig Latin when they don't want anyone to understand. Now, granted, not everyone can do it. It's kind of like the older people do it. The younger kids don't do it as much. So it was fun to learn because then I could speak it, and then all of a sudden these kids in the street were like, we have no idea what he's saying. But my companion knew, and all the adults knew, and then they were like, how does this gringo know how to speak this and we don't? So that was super fun. Yeah, the language is cool down there. One thing, just like maybe before the story, because it's a pretty short story, so maybe just like explain why I'm giving the stories, because I always felt like in my mission, it was a lot of being safe was like I felt like it was on you. Does that make sense? Like, it wasn't, that I was just walking around obliviously into like, oh, there's a bunch of gangsters, I'm just gonna freaking go and contact them or whatever. You had to be smart. You had to be very aware of your surroundings. Obviously, if there was a situation where I knew there were gangsters, like, just hanging out, and I needed to walk by them to go somewhere, I wasn't afraid of it. I was confident in the fact that I would be protected. That being said, missionaries get jumped. Like, members of the church keep the commandments all the time and still die in car accidents and still die in train wrecks, or still die from these accidents, these kind of weird things that happen. Missionaries, I'm not saying any missionaries have died, because I don't think any have died because of gangsters, right? Unfortunately, recently we've heard of some missionaries that have died doing service or getting hit by a vehicle or something. But you got to be smart. You have to be smart and aware of your surroundings. So one night, my companion and I were like walking, and as we were walking, it was in Rio Sarco. It was Elder Hammond and I, and as we were walking, we always would take this shortcut, because Rio Sarco was kind of in like a boomerang shape. So we'd kind of take this shortcut when we were over here through this like little forest thing, and it was getting dark, and we're like, you know what, like, should we go, should we not go? And we're like, you know what, we'll go, because we always go, nothing's ever happened to us. If someone is there, they'll know we're the missionaries. Most of the time they don't mess with us. And as we're walking and getting there, it's getting pretty dark at this point. Both Elder Hammond and I just kind of stopped, and we just like looked at each other, and we our hair was like kind of standing up on the back of our necks, just because like all of a sudden we were scared, because we were feeling the Spirit telling us, like, don't go that way. And so that was very, it was a super weird experience. We actually started walking forward. We're like, no, like, we're just feeling weird. But we had both felt it at the same time. And then all of a sudden we like felt it again. We're like, do not go that way. So we turned around and just like took off, almost running, because we were like, if the Spirit's going to tell us twice, like, let's get the heck out of here. So we took off, and we got back to kind of like the main road, and we just kind of went in that like boomerang shape all the way over to where we were going. And we never found out if something happened there, if someone was waiting there, or if someone was jumped or murdered there, and it wasn't us, but somebody else. So, I don't think anyone was murdered, because we would have heard about it. But it was a very, it was a wake-up call. It was like a wake-up experience. Like, be aware of your surroundings. Don't do dumb things. And at the end of the day, even if you think that it's not going to be dangerous and the Spirit tells you not to do it, like, absolutely listen to it. Because then later on in my mission, when I would feel those same feelings that I felt there, and I would listen to them, that's when I would hear things like, oh, in this certain area of, this certain zone of my area, somebody was murdered last night. And it was like, that's where we were going. And that's where we were told not to go, So, that was a pretty cool experience, as far as like, kind of staying safe. I was in this one area called Rio Sarco, and in English that translates to like the Clearwater River. So I was in this area, and I was there for 4 changes, so for like roughly 6 months, right? A little bit less than that, but I loved that area. I think it was my favorite area in my entire mission. I just loved it. I loved the people. The ward, when I first got there, was like did not like the missionaries, because the missionaries had not been very like dedicated. They hadn't been very devoted or worked very hard, so they had lost all the trust of the members. So when I first got there, we had to work super hard to like gain the trust of the members, to get them to like us, to get them to give us referrals. So my companion and I, my first companion, was very, very difficult. He did not want to work at all. So that was a very hard change. But then my favorite companion, Elder Hammond, who I talked about earlier, I mentioned him earlier, he came into the area, and we just started working like crazy. And we just were really trying to follow the Spirit. We were both super young in the mission. It was my 3rd change, I think his 4th or 5th or something like that. So we were just super, super young in the mission and just trying to, do missionary work the best that we could with like what we knew how to do. So one day we were looking in the recent convert list, and we found a kid who was a recent convert, and he like wasn't going to church because there was like a picture of him, and I was like, I've never seen this kid. So we get his address from like the book of converts, and so we go over, and he was home. So we got in, and we talked to him. We're like, hey, like we've missed you, man. Like, we don't know you, but it's sad that you're not coming to church. Like, is there anything we can do to help, or have you not been able to go because of transportation or something? Because he lived in an area that was like kind of apart from where the church was. There was like the main Rio Sarco, and there was this place called Santa Ana Norte, which is like North Santa Ana. And it was really, it was pretty close to Rio Sarco, but on foot, it was probably like, like a 15, 20-minute walk. So sometimes it was like, a lot of members would just make the walk, but some of them, if they got up late, they were like, oh, well, I'm just not going to go, So he was like, yeah, I'm just kind of struggling with like transportation. And then on top of that, like none of my family like really wants to go. So we're like, okay, well, what if we talk to your family? So we rescheduled an appointment for when his family was there, and we go over and we start talking with him. And his mom and his dad, they were kind of standoffish. Super, super nice, but just like kind of like, oh, well, we are doing what we want to do, so I think we're happy. And as we kept going over, because they would keep inviting us over, they liked us a lot, like as people. As we kept going over, we taught and met a lot more with the dad. The wife was gone working a lot, so it was really hard to meet with her. But we met with the dad a lot, and he started to like read the Book of Mormon. He started to do it on his own. So one day he just like told his wife, he's like, look, I really like this Book of Mormon. Like it just feels really good. And she, even though she wasn't like religious, she was just like the Bible, and he was just kind of like, well, like I feel like God should be able to reveal more scripture. Anyway, one day she just finally picked up the Book of Mormon. I looked her in the eyes when we were teaching her one time, and it was super awesome because we had like some members come over that were like their neighbors down the street that they just loved. They thought they were the greatest people. So we brought them over, and they were like bearing testimony of how powerful the church was. And so, just because that was to kind of give a background on that, those neighbors down the street, he was, I think, the elders quorum president. Oh no, he was the second counselor in the bishopric, and his wife was not a member. So we taught her and we baptized her, and I think now they're sealed in the temple. But she was able to come over and just like testify of the same thing that this lady was struggling with. So it was a huge testimony builder to me of the power of working with members like early on in my mission. And then we just had this super powerful lesson. I remember the night just like vividly, because as we left, my companion and I were just like jumping in the street for joy and just like, yes, it was awesome. It's our last appointment of the day. And I remember looking her in the eyes, and both my companion and I kind of said the same thing. We were just super on the same page that lesson. We were just like, look, we love you so much as a person. Like, you are one of the greatest people ever. She was just like a mom. She was constantly calling us, just like asking us how we were. And she was just so awesome. We both looked her in the eyes and we were like, look, if you are going to get a testimony of this, it's because you're going to do it of your own initiative. It's like, we've invited you to read the Book of Mormon. We've invited you to go to church. We've invited you to do this and that. And you really haven't done any of it. And even if you were to do it, I don't think you would gain a testimony, because we're the ones kind of pushing you. We're the ones really inviting you, because we know how much, how good of an experience this is, right? And so she goes, you know what, elders, I haven't been fair. I haven't done my part, so I'm going to do it, and I'll let you know how it goes. So she took the Book of Mormon, and she started, she started reading it with a prayer, and then she finished with a prayer. And I think she read through all the way through the end of 2nd Nephi in a day. And the next time we came, she was just like on fire. I mean, it was a night and day difference. And it was such a spiritual experience because it was the first time in my mission, everyone has those experiences in their mission, but it was the first time in my mission that really happened. That someone was so anti in terms of like the church. She really loved us, but she was super anti in terms of the gospel. She did not want to believe it. She did not want to be a part of it. She wanted to go out and be able to drink with her girlfriends and do all this stuff. And then she just lit on fire, and she just started like sharing the gospel with anybody that she could. She would share the gospel with her coworkers. They'd ask her why she wouldn't drink, and she would say, I'm Mormon, and I'm proud of it. And she would just, kind of preach the gospel better than any missionary. I don't know, it was so awesome. And the husband was always really strong, but she kind of just caught fire. And she was kind of the dominant one in their relationship. So the moment she caught fire, all the kids were going to church. All the kids were up in Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, and they were at church by 8. And it was awesome. It was just such a wonderful experience because I really saw the power that, first off, the Book of Mormon has in someone's conversion, but I saw the power that, like, the Spirit really works in someone. Because if you read the Book of Mormon, you're going to feel the Spirit. If you really read it with the intent to know if it's true. And the moment she started reading it, it was game over. The moment she called us and told us that she had started with a prayer, read, and ended with a prayer, like sincerely asking God if it was true, my companion and I looked at each other and we were like, when are we going to baptize him? Like, when are we going to ask him to accept a date? Because, like, she's done for. That was the experience I had in my mission with everyone. The moment they started reading the Book of Mormon with like a sincere desire to know if it was true, those are the ones that got baptized. Some of them read it as like, oh, like, it would be cool to like see if this is true. And some of them came to a realization that it was true, but they wouldn't get baptized. But the ones that really just like had to work for it and sought to know if it was true, those are the ones that were baptized and stayed active in the church and just like had very, very strong, solid testimonies. And it was so cool because she started inviting over members to her house for family home evening, and she started inviting investigators to her house for family home evening, and just inviting all these different people over to share the gospel. And she didn't know how to do family home evening, but she was like, well, I'm going to learn how. So she went and she learned how. She got involved in the church. She got a calling, and she just started really working, and she got on fire. And it was a really cool experience. That was one of my favorite mission stories, obviously because it's a family, but just because I love them so much. Like, I miss them so much. I still talk to them often, which is fun. It's cool. But another cool rain story was, so I went to another area. It was called Ahuachapan, and it was like up in the mountains. It was just this crazy place, and like so cool. They had these huge open air markets with just like tons of fruit that I'd never seen before, and it was just like, it was just nuts. It was cool, and that was the area right after this last area I was talking about. So when I was working with Elder Hammond, right before I got transferred, we had been teaching a family of like 6. So I get transferred and I'm like, dang it, And I was like, you know what, I could ask my mission president if I can go back, but at the end of the day, like, it doesn't really matter if I'm there. The family like is going to get baptized. Hopefully like a member baptizes them and that's good enough. And so I just kind of was like bummed because I just really loved this family. So we go back, or we're in Ahuachapan, and I get a call one night. It's like, hey, you can go back to your area to baptize this family. So we go back. The baptism is incredible. It's awesome. They had gotten married before I got there, so like so it was just an awesome experience. And actually, the mom and the dad at that point didn't end up getting baptized because they had to like kind of wait for a couple things. But but the kids did, and the kids were like, it was like 18, 19, and I think one was like 16. So we go back, awesome service, and totally cool. But to get back to Ahuachapan, it was like from where I was, which is called Rio Sarco, to the middle of downtown Santa Ana, it was like 20 minutes. And then from there to Ahuachapan, it was like an hour and 10 minutes. And from Ahuachapan, it was like an hour in this rickety old bus up this huge mountain, because my area was just a high mountain village. So it's like an hour and a half up this mountain. So we get there to Ahuachapan after forever, and it's like 7:10. And as we're getting there, the last bus leaves. And we get out, and all of a sudden we realize that it is like a massive storm above us. And we're like, oh crap. So we're sitting there on the side of the road, and this truck comes by, and he's like, get in. So we jump in the back of this pickup, and and there's people on the side with us, like a mom and her 2 little girls, and then like some other people. So we all jump in, and I think we ended up paying the guy, because that's a ton of weight to be in the back of a truck, and it's like, he's super poor. So we jump in the truck, and we start going up, and it just starts pouring. Like, it just started pouring. And I remember my companion was from Colombia. We're sitting there with our jackets on, because we were in suits for the baptism. So we're sitting there with our suit coats on, and we take them off, and we put them like to cover the little girls, because mostly because the Salvadorian people are super superstitious. So if they like think they get wet, like they're like, oh, I'm gonna get the flu and die. Like they all think like getting wet is just, you're dead. So, these girls are there, and the mom is just like distraught. So we take off our jackets and cover, and we're talking with the mom. We're trying to like console her, and you can't hear anything because it's just pouring. And there's like water coming over like the upside of the mountain as we're cutting across, and just gushing across the road, and the water is like, like up this far on the tires, and at one point it was covering the tops of the tires, and the car's going super slow, so we're all kind of scared that the truck's just gonna get like swept off the edge, and we're just gonna roll like to our death. Like, I'd never been in a situation like that. And so we get to this one midway point called Ataco. So there was Ataco, and we were in Apaneca. That was the name of this village that we were in. And that's where this truck was headed. So it's like at the end of its journey, and everyone else was headed that way too. So we start walking up the road, my companion and I. At this point, we're just absolutely soaked. Like, I'm sure my scriptures at this point are just soaked, even though they're in like 10 bags. So we're walking up the side of the road, and it's pitch black, just pitch black. But I distinctly remember when I got out of the truck, I looked over at my companion, and he was new in the mission, so I was like training him. And I remember thinking, this kid looks like he's 30 years old, which was the most random thought, but I remember thinking his face looks so old right now. And I was like, that's weird. So we keep walking up, and he'd been pretty quiet. And as we're walking, and we get like 100 yards from the turnoff to Ataco, and he goes, I'm like allergic to the cold. And I was like, what? And like in Spanish, I it didn't make sense in my head. I was like, you're allergic to cold? What does that even mean? And so he's like, we have to find shelter now, because I like get really swollen. My body swells up. And so I like looked at him, and I looked at his face, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's why he looks so old. And I remember all of a sudden it got super real, and I remember just thinking, this is really scary. I get goosebumps thinking about it. And I just remember praying so hard. And I remember the words of my prayer was like, God, I have no idea what to do, but I've been entrusted on behalf of the mission president and of this kid's parents with the safety, like, and the welfare and the good training of this missionary. And I was like, help me to know what to do. Help me to help this kid. Please send someone. And I'm not kidding. I'm not a big I'm not the kid that gets up in testimony meeting and says, I was praying and on my knees I got an answer, because that just does not happen for me. It comes later. But it was 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds later, that a truck came around the corner in the pitch black. And it was a truck that in El Salvador, they have trucks that have canopies on them and like metal cages around them, and they just transport a bunch of people. So if you don't want to go on the bus because you don't have money, which doesn't make sense because it costs like 10 cents to go on the bus, or 5 cents, or 2 cents, like it's just crazy, super cheap. You can go in one of these trucks and pay even less. This truck came by, no one in it, canopy on it, metal cage, and I remember thinking, this is straight from God. Like, God knew that I was going to be at this point because he sent that truck up 30 minutes ago, because that truck had to be coming up on the road, or he wouldn't have gotten there right as I was saying my prayer. And so that was in the moment just like a really big like faith builder. Like, God is watching out for me. Like, I know that he is. And people, you can say coincidence, you can call it whatever you want, but that was really, really big faith builder for me. So we get in the back of this truck, I help my companion, and at this point he's like struggling to move. And he gets in there and he's just silent, and he's kind of like hunched over, kind of like around his knees, and he starts shivering. And he's just like, he kind of like leans over to me, he says something, and I was like, well, maybe it's because my Spanish isn't good, I didn't understand him. But then I understand what he's saying, and he's saying, my throat is starting to close up. And I remember being so scared, and I had my arms around him, and I'm just holding him in my arms, like trying to get him warm, and I was kind of like rubbing his arms to like create friction, like just kind of rubbing his arms and his legs and like his back and stuff, just to like get some sort of friction and heat. And he goes, that it's hurting me because my skin is so sensitive, it hurts. And I had no idea what to do, so I said a prayer, and then like, I don't know if this is okay. I didn't know if it was, but at the time it was like the only thing I thought to do. And I just put my hands on his head. And right then and there in the back of the truck, I gave him a blessing, because at this point he's going, and he can't breathe. And I can hear him struggling to breathe. And he's like crying. He's super distraught. And so I put my hands on his head, and I just blessed him that his body would be able to fight this, and that he would survive. And I remember I was like, was that me or was that God? Like, was I just so scared that I said that? And it felt like, an hour. It felt like forever to get up to Apaneca when it should have only taken like 10 or 15 minutes. And there was water gushing down from the side of the mountain. This truck at one point, like the left rear wheel like swung out over the edge of like the cliffside, and it was just a terrifying experience. But we finally make it to Ataco, the turnoff, or Apaneca, and I kind of hit the truck bed, just kind of signaling, hey, this is where we get off. So he lets us off. He lets me so he stops and I get down. The funny thing about this truck was that there wasn't like glass here, it was just metal, so he couldn't see us. He was just like kind of gauging time. So I'm getting down and I'm helping my companion down. He starts to go, and my companion's still in the truck. And I remember my companion looks at me, and his backpack was like stuck. He looks at me, he looks at the truck, he looks back at me, and he just jumped. And he rolled like 4 or 5 times, and he was instantly like up on his feet. And I think there was a ton of adrenaline, but he's back on his feet. And his backpack was gone, so his camera was gone. And we'd just come from like a baptism, and he had just had a baptism like a couple days before I'd gotten there. So all his pictures were gone. But he like smashed his hand pretty good when he jumped out. And so I grab him and I put his arm around my shoulder, and I'm just like helping him. And I had an umbrella, and he was kind of using like the umbrella as kind of like a cane. And why we didn't use the umbrella when we were walking up and like in the truck, it's just because they just get destroyed and all the wind, they just get rocked. So we hadn't used it. So we're using it as a cane, and the power was out because the storm knocked the power out in Apaneca. It was out for a couple days after that. But I remember I looked at him and I was like, dude, like, why did you jump out? Like, why didn't you like try and like stop him? And he's like, I probably should have, but like, I didn't want to leave you. And it was like a really surreal experience because it was so crazy and so scary, but it like made me and this kid from Colombia who was scared and he was away from home, like super tight. And it wasn't like an answer to prayers. It wasn't like we weren't friends before, but I guess we didn't have like a lot of like companionship unity. And this just like really, really brought us close together, but at the same time, like really showed us how much God's hand was in our life. So I know that was a story about the weather, but it was just like a really spiritual experience that I had with a storm. Super scary. It was terrifying. I thought my companion was going to die, but like it was cool. It's kind of a cliche thing and everyone says it, especially Elder Holland, but my mission really did mean everything to me. It was super, super hard to come home. For like the last 2 weeks of my mission, I was just like crying whenever anyone would like mention it. I remember my last Sunday, like a family that I was really, really close with, they drove out from one of my old areas to where I was at, and they like came and gave me this present. And they just sat there just like crying, and I was just like sobbing. So my mission meant everything to me. It was so, so hard to come home. And I've often thought about why it meant everything to me, why my mission was as important to me as it was. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One reason I think is because it was something I'd always looked forward to growing up. And I think the second reason, and the more important than that, is because I invested every fiber of my being in my mission. And if I could give you or anyone else going to El Salvador like one piece of advice, it would be, when you put on that missionary tag in the MTC, or when you are set apart as a missionary, everything else takes us like a backseat role in terms of importance. And I think I took it to an extreme. Like, I didn't really care about emailing my family that much. Like, I didn't care about having a long phone call with them on the 2 times a year that I could call them. I was like, all right, well, guys, I got to go. I got to teach an appointment. I know I only have spoken with you for like half an hour, but I got to go. And I think the reason I loved my mission so much and that it became such a part of me is because I invested myself so much in it. I think I mentioned earlier, when I talk about my mission, I don't equate it with hard. It was difficult. Yeah, there were many difficult things about it. But the number one word that comes to my mind was fun. I mean, I loved my mission. It was just a magical experience, always just like being led by the Spirit to people and saving people's lives, literally. It was just such a wonderful experience. But I think a mission is very much what you make it. I think you can have a wonderful mission. I think you have a great mission. I think you can have a good mission. I think you can have a really poor mission. I think you can have just an absolutely incredible mission, but it's all what you make it. It's all how you view it. And, that's how I viewed my mission. I chose to view it as the most amazing experience of my life, and I loved it. I know that missionary work is the work of God, especially of late. It's accelerating, and it's exciting to see. I wish I could be a missionary right now out there. It would be super fun. Obviously it's a time in my life when I'm focused on different things, and that's not bad. But it would be very exciting to be a missionary in the mission field right now. I have a testimony that the Book of Mormon changes people. If you focus on getting people to read the Book of Mormon, a lot of other things in their life will just change without you really having to do much. They will feel the spirit of that, and they will feel the truth of that and change. I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet, and that this church is the restored church. And I know that through the Book of Mormon, because I have a testimony of the Book of Mormon, and that it is convincing evidence that he was a prophet, that he was ordained and called of God. And I know that if you work and invest yourself 100% in your mission, I'm not saying I did it perfectly, I'm just saying that that's something I really worked hard at, that if you do that, your mission will be incredible. You will love your mission. You'll forget about everyone at home, you'll forget about everything else, and you will get up every morning thinking about your investigators, stoked to just see them and to watch them progress. And that's my testimony and some advice that I guess I could give you. I love the church. I love the gospel. I'm super grateful for my mission. It has shaped a lot of who I am today. And I guess I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.